Hello, 4 o'clock class. The great Mike Amori. I have a series of problems for you to work on this week. I know you're all going to work on them diligently and come to class having explored all the possibilities that exist in these positions. Thank you very much. Okay, this is actually a variation from a game that Magnus Carlsen played recently at the Tata Steel tournament. He had the white pieces, and it looks like he just allowed black to skewer the queen. You see that the queen here and the rook are on the same diagonal. I can just kind of light that up for you. So he calculated that in this position, he wouldn't mind if, in fact, that happened. So here's bishop d6. This did not happen in the game. In the game, his opponent played rook e7. So here's my question to you. Set up the chessboard, put this position on the board, and then ask yourself, can black play bishop d6? If he can, come to class and say that he missed something. If he can't, come to class and tell me why not. Okay, pause your video, set this up on a chessboard, go to work. Okay, it turns out you cannot skewer the queen, because if you try to skewer the queen, you're going to get hit with pawn takes g6, just giving up the queen for free. Very cool move. If you take the queen, pawn takes f7. Very important you take the f7 pawn. As you'll see, there's a bishop down here on b3 protecting that pawn, and it also creates double check. Whenever there's a double check, you all know the king has to move. He cannot go into the corner because of rook g8 mate, so his only other move is king f8, and from here you should be able to calculate a simple mate. I think it's mate in 2 or 3. I think it's 3 here, right? Just rook g8, king e7, promote the pawn with check, king d7, and now you have mate in 1. Just make sure you find it. I know, mate in 1 sounds simple. Just get in the habit of folding your hands, get into a calculating pose, see it clearly on the board before you play it. Okay? Queen d8. Game is finish it. Okay? Very good. So go back. Try to visualize as much of the combination or the sequence as you can from this position. All right? Bishop d6. You just take on g6 with the pawn, and from there, if they don't take the queen, back from here, they're already in big trouble. There's no way out of this. There's all sorts of bad things that can happen to you with black. Black is already lost here. Okay? All right. Okay, let's go to number 2. Again, we're working on technique this semester. The ability to take positions from one area to another. For example, if you have a technically winning position, you hear the word technically in there. The technique is a chess player doing all the things necessary to win that game. So if you have a small material advantage, what are the kind of things, the types of things you have to do? Well, you have to, let's say you're up a pawn. Well, if that pawn is a passed pawn, part of your technique is the ability to move that pawn up the board. But that doesn't come for free because your opponent is going to try to stop you. So you're going to have to learn how to stop counterplay, how to create other threats while you're trying to push the pawn. Because if you create another threat, it's like creating a diversion. You get your opponent to think about something else while you're pushing the pawn. And very often in chess, when you give your opponent 2 problems to solve and only 1 move to do it, something is going to give. Okay, here we have the white pieces. Part of technique in chess is the ability to make draws in losing positions. So here with white, you're down 2 pawns. If you trade the queens, you lose. The king will just take back. I'm not even going to put it up on the board over here. If you take the here, I'm just going to take back with the king. And then at some point, push this pawn. You guys should be able to see this in your head. There's a 2-on-1 majority here on this side. Here as well, on the queen side, there's a 2-on-1, but these 2 pawns are double. They're not going anywhere. So once you push this pawn, it's going to be pretty easy for black to win this game. Okay? So once we understand that, now the issue becomes, is there something here that we can kind of use to weasel out of this? And you should eventually start learning these stalemate tricks. Did any of you folks pick that up? And again, please set up each of these positions. The best way for you to do this would be if you had a computer where you could set up a real chessboard next to it so you could hear my voice and see the position on the screen while alternating between the screen and the board in front of you. Again, we want you to get that muscle memory, get the same feeling of playing in a real chess game. And computers are incredibly useful, but you're not clicking mouses when you're playing in real games, unless it's an internet tournament. But that's not what we're concerned with here. So set up a board, dig in. So in this position, there's a really cool idea that White has, and it's simply this move King A3, which is really, really nice because after King A3, Black cannot take. If Black takes the White Queen, it's a stalemate. So what does Black do? To try to avoid the stalemate, Black can keep playing. Their only move with the King is King H6 because the Queen is pinned. That's a really cool idea, and I want to make sure that you see it. This pin here, and I'll just light it up real quick, is really annoying because if you move the King anywhere else, Black will lose. You'll just take the Queen and win the game. So if Black wants to move the King, they have to play King H6. So again, in this position, you clearly do not want to trade queens. You will lose the game. So how to continue? Because of this pawn here on H4, you have this nice move, Queen C1 check. The Queen cannot block because you just take the Queen. So the only move is back. So what do we do now? We simply go back to C2. You guys see it, right? Now, there's another way for Black to keep this game alive, and it's the move A6. And after A6, you have to find the next way to draw. Keep in mind, you can never take the Queen, because when you do, Black is going to take back, and by the time your King comes over here, I mean, that's one way to get back in the game, is to try to win your own pawn. That's not going to work because after you try King B3, let's say, King F5, King C4, just G5. And after G5, you have to take. And then just H4, which is a really cool idea. After H4, you'll see I made the square of the pawn. If you're a 4 o'clock student, you should know what that means. If you don't, come in and let me know. But once the White King is in a position like here, that he can't access that square on his next move, there's no way to catch the pawn. This pawn is not going anywhere because we just take it. And here White is completely lost. So again, you cannot trade the queens. So after A6, what do? Pause the video. Yeah, you have this really nice move, Queen B1, and that keeps the stalemate alive. If the King goes to H6, you simply go back to C1 with a check, forcing here, and now you can just repeat moves. You can put the Queen here, and question, can you put the Queen here as well? What happens if you put it on C2? Does that change anything? I don't know, you guys figure it out. All right. Okay, here's another one of these endgame positions where in the technique aspect or the idea of honing or getting your technique sharp, some of the tools that players use, especially in the endgame, is really restricting an enemy piece to the point where it will force a zugzwang that is just winning. And here to do that, you first should spend time looking at the board and getting an appreciation for just how bad this bishop on H7 is and how to take advantage of that. Well, again, stop the video, set up the board, and spend a lot of time trying to solve this. If you put the basic ideas together, you should be able to do it. Okay, the winning idea, or the first move, is king h6. But there's an idea attached to that. What it does is it forces the king into the corner. And you should be able to see that from here, that after king h6, black's only reasonable move is going to be king h8. You cannot hang the bishop, because if you hang the bishop, you're going to have one of those positions where you have a pawn wedge, where the white king is going to win the pawn, and even if you get a theoretically drawn king and pawn ending, with the extra minor piece, you can use that to waste a tempo and win the ending. So hopefully by now you guys have this stuff down cold. All right, so after king h6, king h8 is forced. Now, really nice idea, knight h4. Think about what it does. There are, out of all the legal moves in this position, what to do. You cannot play bishop to g8. And why not? Because of checkmate. So take that one out. That's not going to work. All right, so what else does black do in this position? Well, you can move your king to g8. You're certainly not going to put your bishop on g6. So that forces king g8. Now, how to make progress? Same idea. We're going to get the knight to, at some point, make this an illegal move. So if you can imagine the knight somewhere on the board, so that if the king was here, and you know you can force him here, because if he ever comes out this way, your king will just take the black bishop. So what square could your knight be on to make king f8 illegal? That would be like e7. Okay, so what do we do? How do we do that? I'm sorry, d7 would work, correct? Except if the king were in the corner, what would make this move illegal? I hope I'm not confusing you, because I'm confused myself. Let me rephrase this. What we want to do is, when the king is on h8, we want to make this move illegal. And if that's illegal, then the only thing that black is going to be able to do is move this bishop, and hopefully with bad consequences. Okay, so after knight h4, king g8. Did you find the correct path? Knight f3. King has to go back to g8. Any bishop move loses, well, there's only one. And any king move, instead of king h8, you just take the bishop and win. So after king h8, what do? Knight e5. After king g8, think about where we want to go. We want to prevent this on black's, not next move, but the next time he shuttles back and forth, we want to make g8 illegal. So we're going to do it from e7. So what do we play? Simply knight here. Okay? Knight here. Question for you. If you put the knight here and the bishop takes and takes, what is the result of this position? Do you guys know? Hopefully you said it's a draw, because no matter whose turn it is, the moment that white takes this pawn, for example, let's say we put our king here, all you have to do is be able to answer this move with what? Yes, king here. All right, so that line is not going to work. So back here, you don't want to put your knight on g6 right now. So we put it on c6. And again, study the board. The bishop has one move, it loses. The king has three moves. Only one saves the bishop. King h8. Now we play knight e7. What is black's possibilities here? You have to move the bishop. You've just stalemated the king. Black's best chance is to play here, hoping that you do what? You take with the king and draw the game. You simply play knight takes check, king comes out, and you have a king and knight against a pawn. You have a win, okay? A little complicated, Okay, so I'm not sure if I explained it properly in the middle. So, take it back to the opening position, which is here, and try to put that whole plan together and see if that helps, okay? All right, very good. Okay, my friends. Boy, endgame technique. You're going to see this kind of position happen a fair amount, more than you think in endings with just kings and pawns. Very often, this kind of ending will happen when there's a pawn race. And you'll notice that the black king down here on h2 is in white's half of the board. Well, what happens is, very often, opponents will make moves or get into king and pawn races where you'll have a queen on the board, but you're not going to be in position to save the day. Queen on queen is a draw most of the time. But the problem is, this position that you're looking at can be forced from the original position, which is going to be from here. From here. We're going to look at this in a moment. This was the picture that you saw on the blog. Okay. Now, to get to the position that I showed you, which is here, we can actually force this with a series of checks. This is a memory marker. This is the kind of move you have to memorize. So here the winning move for white is simply to play king f2. And when you play king f2, black is in zugzwang. The king has no moves. Black's best try is to give you a check here and hoping that you take with the queen, stalemating, but you simply take with the king and then checkmate black on the next turn, okay? So this is the position that we're trying to force. If we can get here, we're going to play king f2 and win the game. Now, let's go back. This here is the position from the blog. Now, how to win. Playing queen g6 check gives the black king a couple of choices here. If he goes to f1, we're going to check from f5. You should all see why he can't go to e1. You guys see that, right? e1, you have checkmate down here on b1. So what does he do? If he scampers over to this side again, we come closer with the queen, g4 check. Where does he go? He cannot go to f1. If the king moves to f1, there is mate in 2. I'm not going to show you on the board. You should be able to do this at home. So what does he do? If he comes to h2, aha, does this look familiar to you? Indeed it does. Thank you for a nice game. So let's go back. We give a check, king h3. All right, we check from h5. The whole idea is to give a sequence of checks until you can force a mating pattern. The king has to move and protect the queen. King g2. She comes closer with g4. King h2. And then here. And again, let's go back. What's the other alternative after queen g4 check? Where does he go? The only other move is king f1, and this is a secondary checkmating pattern. That's nice to know. Do you see it? It's mate in 2. Check, king g1, queen f2 mate. Okay? Memorize this pattern. It will come up in endgame studies and in real games. Even if you don't get this exact position, the idea of playing a move like king f2, which is kind of cool because you give the most powerful piece in the game a chance to move wherever she wants. And wherever she goes, obviously, black is going to get mated. Okay? All right. Okay, last one. Here we're looking at the board from white's perspective. White is going up. So these two passed pawns on a6 and b5 are connected. They're on the queen side, and they're both passed pawns. Connected passed pawns are incredibly powerful. As a matter of fact, if it's white's turn, you'll learn a concept from the endgame, very important for your technique, of having 2 pawns on the 6th rank against a rook. And you might think that this is not so common, because in your mind you're going to say, wait a minute, why would a master ever play some position where they're down a rook for a couple of pawns? Well, we know better, because it always depends on the position. If that gets to the 6th, this kind of unit here, it's worth a heck of a lot more than 2 points. No matter what you do, for example, if you go after that pawn, white's just going to push the A pawn. Now, how do you stop that from queening? You can't. If you go behind it, then they're just going to move the B pawn. And whatever you do here, you take one, they're going to queen the other. So believe it or not, black is lost. However, if you guys get a position like this, what I would recommend that you do, say you're playing in Norwalk or some tournament, take the pawn, let them queen, and then connect your rook to your king. You see how this rook is very close to this king? This way you can't fall for immediate double attacks. If you keep the rook and king close together, you'll be surprised at how hard it is to win queen against rook. That's a little tournament trick. Okay, let's go back to our position. Okay, here it is. Black to play and win. Because the pawns are not on the 6th rank, you have a tempo. It is critical that you put the rook behind the furthest most pawn. Do not put it behind the back pawn, because again, if you do, the front pawn will run, threatening to queen. You will have to go underneath to stop it. And then after b6, we have a position that we just saw, which is not good at all for black. Okay, so the winning move is to put the rook behind the furthest most pawn from here. Okay, let's go back. This is the original position. You go beneath the furthest pawn, and no matter what white does, if he pushes the A pawn, you just take it. If he pushes the B pawn, you just take the A pawn. If they try to activate the king, this is an important little maneuver, rook A5. And here you have time to grab both pawns. If they push the B pawn, you just take the A pawn. They push again, and you have just enough time to get behind it. Notice I'm saying, well, you have more than just enough time, but in some positions, the white king may be floating around here, and that move that I just showed you would have been impossible. Okay, so hopefully you guys pick something up. Put the rook behind the furthest most pawn. Attack the back pawn from the side. And some of you may have said, well, what happens if, not that, what happens if they push this one? You just take it. And if they attack your rook, you have time to attack it from the front. Okay? I hope you guys learned something and you put some real time in. Okay, my friends.